A Rose is a Rose, Chapter 7, by spacebrony. Thade entered the village in the dead of night. There were no ponies in sight. He melted into the shadows, sliding elusively down to the street. Could it really be here? In this simple little town? 2 years of searching, 2 years of leads, of dead ends, of false trails, of lost hope, only to discover it has been here this whole time? The idea was ridiculous, absurd, but his last choice had seemed no as confident as one could be whilst under fear of death, that is. He paused for a moment, glancing to the stars. The full moon hung in the sky, from her lunar prison. Nightmare moons seemed to glare down at him. Thade was familiar with the myth of the mare and the moon. After all, one could not dedicate his life to searching for one myth without learning of many others along the way. Banished to the moon by her sister Celestia, it was fabled that at the end of her 1,000 years of imprisonment she would return once more, casting Equestria into eternal night. Thade wasn't sure if the legend was true or not, but suspected he would find out in a decade or so, when the 1,000 years come to a close. That is, of course, according to many of the books he read on the subject, none of which contained the information he truly sought. He carried on, craftily hugging corners and making no sound. He turned onto another desolate road, made a left at the next street, and there it was. Once more he began to doubt. Could the book really be here, in this library within a tree? Years of searching dank caverns, abandoned castles, impenetrable fortresses, for the book to be in a library of all places. Nevertheless, he was here, and had no choice but to carry on. With a nearly silent whisper, he teleported into the library balcony above a tree branch. The window opened with a faint glow, and he slipped inside. It was empty, as he had expected. Shelves of books lined the walls. He walked to the nearest one. Elements of a Successful Meal, read the spine of the first book he saw. Moved to the right, scanning the leather-bound text. There's no possible way, he thought. This is too easy. It would never be kept. A noise outside. He reacted instantly, slipping into the darkness under the nearby suitcase. He glanced to the window, searching for the source of rustling. For a moment, he saw the silhouette of something. The bird hopped through the window, the same window that he himself had entered. If Thade wasn't so skilled in the art of silence, he would have breathed a sigh of relief. Merely a bird! With a malicious grin, he hit it with a quick paralyzing spell, and it dropped to the ground. He walked up to its motionless body and frowned. Dead. I must have used too much force. I do often underestimate my own abilities. His thoughts were cut off as he noticed the view out the window for the first time. He noticed the castle in the distance. Canterlot, of course. The pieces fell together. The book was here, beneath the watchful eye of Celestia. Thade wasn't sure why she would prefer to keep it here instead of under the defenses of Canterlot Castle. Years of searching, to end up in a library, to find a book in a defenseless library. Perhaps that was it. Yes, it had to be. They couldn't help but marvel at the genius of it. The object of his desire was hidden in plain sight. This library, this simple tree, was the last place he chose to search. He had come here in desperation, as a last hope, one final effort, precisely because it seemed too easy. That's why it was here. Who would look for a fabled hidden book in a simple library? It was under E! This did mean, however, that he could not take it with him. The book must stay, or Celestia might grow suspicious. Thade had no reason to believe the alicorn was guarding the book, or even aware of it. But if she was, stealing it could only mean drawing attention to himself. A mixture of emotions came to him. Frustration that he had wasted so much time when the answer was so obvious. A flood of relief that his first part of the journey was finally over. Jarring nervousness that perhaps the book wasn't here. But there was a deeper fear, one that he had tried but failed to ignore. What if the book was there, but it did not contain the spell or instructions he sought? How could it be that even the fabled text Magic of the Damned, which thought to be destroyed until his searches unearthed it, did not contain the spell? Why, an insignificant book from his childhood did. The last time he held it was long ago, and he sought it out now only because he had no remaining options. It was a desperate grasp, a wild guess, but maybe it was something more than that. Intuition, perhaps. With anticipation, he returned his attention to the bookshelf. The dead and the free. Not even close. He continued sliding to the right, searching through the alphabet. Flame of the Phoenix. Monsters and ghosts and other scary stories. Quest for the Nightshades. He impatiently sifted through several more books, and then, there it was. At first he could only stare, overcome with surprise, eagerness, and fear? Yes, still the fear that the book didn't contain what he needed, of course. It slid sensuously off the shelf, and fell in a sharp black aurora. His magic was no longer a brilliant red, as it was in his youth. No, that had changed soon after he began his quest. He saw it as a sign of strength. Or at least that's what he told himself. The worn leather-covered book dropped gently into his outstretched hooves. He read the cover, then read it again. There it was. Supernaturals. God, I love that show. How long since he had last held his book, flipped through its pages, inhaled its dusty old scent? What happened after that fateful day in his youth, when he used it to discover the location of Sonesso? How did it arrive here, on this bookshelf within a tree? He supposed that it was a tale that could never be told. Not that it mattered. It was his once more. That is all that counted. For a terrifying moment, he had the urge to throw it, to bash it through the window, to expel it from his presence. He imagined himself to do it as if in a dream. How easy would it be to destroy years of hard work, to make useless years of searching, to ruin this ancient binding, to break the promise he had made to himself, to her. He could end it all here, if he wanted. He could turn back and turn away. These thoughts cut off sharply as he noticed for the first time the book's subtitle. He blinked in surprise. Natural cures that are super, it read. His brain started to the shot. He didn't have the capacity to consider the meaning of this. His eyes scoured the title once more. Supernaturals. The natural cures that are super. He threw the book cover open again, hastily flipping to a random page in the middle of a dusty relic, reading the first words he saw. Using milk grass to cure stiff wings. First, be sure that the milk grass is in season. Soiled milk grass will not work. Squeeze the milk out of the grass as if it were toothpaste. With a fell roar of frustration, Thane grabbed the brittle pages and yanked them out. In a puff of dust, the shredded paper floated to the ground like autumn leaves. Where is it? The room suddenly became unnaturally dark, as if a tarp had been placed over the moon. With a hectic rustling, books began flying off the shelves like startled bats. The air became a swirl of swooping pages and dust. The window shutter burst open, clacking wildly against the wall. Then it was over. Thade stood alone in the library, which now appeared to have fallen victim to a tornado. Books and pages were strewn about crazily. He was breathing heavily, his head slightly lowered. I must clear my mind. I must gain control, he thought. It is here. I know it's here. Slowly, like a snake rising out of the basket, a black tendril of magic slid from his horn. The seeking spell danced blindly through the air, feeling its way along the field of fallen books. Suddenly it shot up, as if it had noticed some otherwise undetectable signal. It dashed across the room, fell across several more books, then stiffened as in excitement. The tendril began pulsating slowly with a gray light. It found its target. Maybe he should have tried Starsoil the Bearded Wing. Thade shoved books from his path, trying not to allow the excitement to get better of him. He traced along the glowing tendril of it to its source, a pile of dust and torn leather, amidst hundreds of other piles of dust and torn leather. Thade, you fool! He thought to himself. You've gone and destroyed it! His first thought was to use a repair spell, but he chastised himself before making such a mistake. If the book was as powerful as he hoped, such minor magic could cause it damage, even destroy it. Magic repels magic, the first lesson every unicorn learned. His horn glowed instead with a revealing spell, a complex one he had learned from his distance travels. While the repair spell would directly influence his target, and therefore potentially do it harm, A revealing spell would act as a catalyst, a slight nudge, a magical instigator. He smiled slightly at his ingenuity, his heart glowing even brighter. The pile began glowing with the same aurora. Suddenly, the torn letter lifted from the ground, floating before Thade. The dust particles, which were paper only minutes ago, swirled before him. They began reassembling, faster and faster. The book began to fill once more with the pages. The leather began to melt back together. The binding began to take its familiar shape. Thade stared, eyes wide, as the book rebuilt itself before him. Within moments the dust was gone. The pages filled. The leather cover was whole. It turned to face him. The tile glowed as if each letter were a crack through the walls of hell. As he watched, though, part of the tile began to disappear. Its light began to fade. Soon, the book was no longer titled Supernaturals, Natural Cures that are Super. It now read Supernaturals. The one solitary word grew slowly, distorted, then shrank, then grew distorted again. The effect was nauseating, but Thade was soon spared, for the floating book opened before him, the pages flipping by as if a soundless wind. They then stopped. There was a flash, a tingling sensation. Then Thade was no longer in the library. Snow-capped mountains towered around him. He was flying with incredible speed through the rocky slopes and canyons, though he felt no sensation of movement, not even a breeze, as if he were stationary, floating motionless in the air, while the world rotated below with great velocity. In the distance, the highest peak of all. Soon it was right before him. He slowed to a stop and saw that in the mountainside was a gaping cavern, dimly lit with flickering red. Then he was inside a cavern, saw a glowing figure laying on an altar in the center. The columns, the pillars, cracked and began to topple. Indecipherable symbols lined the circular wall. Between and behind the two farthest the pillars, the stone wall was carved with a beautiful figure of a rose. But there was no sound but his own quick breathing. Something tiny near the altar rose into the air. Though Thade was almost close enough to touch it, he couldn't tell what it was. The world seemed to glow brightly, resulting in a dreamlike blur that clouded his vision. The object began floating toward him, and suddenly he recognized its shape. With a soundless burst of light, the object disappeared. In its place was a small disk of pure light. The entire cavern was trembling around him. Cracks raced through the ceiling. Shattered debris were flung in every direction. Still, the only sound was his breathing. The small white disk was now a larger white disk, and it continued growing. Soon, it nearly filled his whole field of vision. The trembling lessened. The cavern stabilized. The white portal stood silently before him. He watched in wonder, staring intently into the vast, empty whiteness, not seeing his eyes lest he missed something. As he floated in the air, his shadow floated upon the ground. An unknown amount of time passed, and then... Did he see something? Was that a silhouette? A hint of gray in the white oblivion? Yes, it must have been. It grew larger, walked near her, and came more defined. The blur became that shape of a pony, a most familiar pony. And even before he could see her mane or coat, he knew it was her. In his mind flashed every moment they spent together, however brief, along with whatever trial he had overcome for her, every obstacle, all to see her again, to undo unjust fate. He was aware he was crying, sobbing, and also aware he was slowly gliding backwards. Only a few more steps. That's all it would take, and he would truly see her again, finally stare into those eyes once more. His slow backwards glide began accelerating. No! He said, eyes still locked on the sharpening blur. Faster now. No! The disc shrank before him. The cavern receded. He was flying back through the mouth now, faster and faster. Soon the gaping hole was a spot in the distance. The tallest mountain became a tiny hill. When he finally looked back up, the vision was gone. Around him was the library, the ground still littered with destroyed books. He was exhausted, too drained to express his frustration, too tired to even wipe his tears. But he could still think. There was much thinking to be done. He picked up the book once more. It felt warm in his hooves. That was undoubtedly the spring of magic I just saw. So it is real. Then what is the next step? Perhaps the book explains how to find it. The thought was cut off by another, more powerful one one originating from deep within his mind and soul. That was her. That was her, and she was there. So was I. For a moment, this thought flowed through his mind like a river through a meadow. There used to be fear. Fear that his obsession had eclipsed his love, that he would bring her back, only to discover that things had somehow changed between them. This fear was washed away, and the reassurance was exhilarating. For the first time in years, Thade felt truly happy. Then another part of his mind began to speak. "Don't be stupid," the other said. "That was merely a vision from the book. It really wasn't her. It was the book's projection of what you wished to see." Thade frowned slightly. "Even so, it may have merely been a vision. But it proves I still love her. If I can love the vision of her, surely I could love her true self even more." "Yes," the other half replied, its voice taking a malicious pleasure in this wicked thought. "But could she still love you?" Suddenly the book jumped out of his hooves and fell to the floor. Thade staggered backwards in surprise, then stepped cautiously and curiously to where it lay open on the ground. Its pages flipped hastily, glowing slightly with the full prismatic spectrum. He stood just over it, peering closely at the ruffling paper, waiting for them to stop. They did, finally. But before he could read anything, he was thrown back with a powerful thrust, landing on a pile of book and book ashes. He slowly got to his hooves, rubbing his aching jaw, and turned once more toward the book. The blow had been strong, and it took a moment for his vision to clear. Then he saw that, floating in the air above the book's open pages, wavering slightly as though with great heat, was a single word. It was written in an unfamiliar language, with characters he had never seen before. Still, he understood it perfectly. The temperature of the room seemed to have gone up. It was uncomfortably hot, almost unbearably so. Thade thought he heard voices, though that may have been the wind outside. If there were really voices, so many spoke at once that it was impossible to follow any individual speaker in the midst of the low chant-like chatter. In the corner of the room, a rustling. He somehow forced his attention on the floating spell and entered a fighting stance, prepared to ward off the bird. With incredible vitality, it hopped not as nonchalantly as a bird could possibly hop, across the floor, then up the window with an indignant ruffle of wings. Thade watched it go in amazement. Then he turned back to the word in the air, staring with an intensity that could have meant either fear or reverence or both. The longer he stared, the more uncomfortable he became. His head began to ache. He heard a ringing in his ear. Stars began clouding his vision. He turned away, finally shook his head to clear it, and turned back. The word was gone. All was quiet. Legs shaking, he approached the open book. Cautiously, he lifted it off the ground with his hooves. He feared touching it with magic. The page that greeted him was inscribed with only 12 lines. He recognized them from his youth, but as he read, a new meaning dawned upon him. They began to read aloud. "To the paramount spring, a relic you must bring." Pinky, are you sure this is a good idea? I have a bad feeling about this." Applejack glanced nervously to the enormous making bowl, then to Pinky, then to Rainbow Dash, who hovered above the giant pole, holding an equally giant wooden spoon.
Of course this is a good idea, Pinky giggled. Haven't you always wanted to break a world record?
She looked up to Dash, who smiled and adjusted her safety goggles.
Ready?
"Ready!" Dash replied, taking a sprinter's running line stance in midair.
Great!
Pinky turned to Applejack.
Now, when I give the thumbs up, you start throwing in chocolate, then Dash will start mixing.
Applejack sighed. "Well, if you'll say so, I don't see why. What's it still say?"
Dash will start mixing.
"No, before that."
You'll throw in the chocolate?
"No, before that."
When I give the thumbs up, you guys will start?
Thumbs up? What the hell does that mean?
Don't worry about it. Ready?
Applejack shared a confused shrug and a grin with Dash. Sometimes it was best to just let Pinky be Pinky. "Ready! Same here!"
Now!
Applejack began tossing apple-sized chocolate chips into the bowl, first throwing them one at a time, then bucking in 2 or 3 at once. Meanwhile, Dash slipped down with the spoon. racing around at the top of the bolt faster and faster, until she was nothing more than a blue blur amidst a hurricane of batter and chocolate. After almost a minute of this, Applejack ran out of chocolate chips, and dashed slow to a stop, panting heavily, but smiling crazy.
Perfect,
Piggy said, hopping up and down in that strange way of hers.
Now I'll add in the final ingredient.
She reached into a bag and brought out a large jar of vanilla extract. Carefully, she climbed the ladder to the rim of the bowl, where she prepared to pour the liquid. Not too much, Dash warned. This is a huge bowl, but that stuff is strong. Piggy stuck out her tongue in concentration and slowly removed the lid. Then she leaned over the edge of the bowl, tilting the jar slightly. The first drop nearly fell, but the jar flew out of her hooves, not into the bowl, but down to the ground, where it began rolling around crazily.
Ah!
Piggy yelled in surprise. Cleanse it, quick! Applejack shouted. Piggy jumped down off the ladder and tackled the jar.
I got it!
She cheered victoriously.
I got it!
The jar fought from her grip, almost getting away. She started sliding slowly along the ground, holding on to the flailing jar as tightly as possible.
Guys, help!
Pikey, hold on, I'm coming! Applejack shouted. Suddenly the jar grew incredibly hot. She let go with a pained surprise. Then she woke up. With a gasp, she glanced around in confusion.
Guys?
After a moment, everything came back to her. She sighed dejectedly. After Applejack left her, she caught sight of a butterfly and decided to follow it. It led her deeper into the woods, but then, amazingly, it managed to bring her right back to the clearing where Applejack left her. When she first realized this, she was incredulous.
Are you joking? I can't even get lost properly in the woods. How am I supposed to find a spring and meet up with my friends if I can't even get lost in the woods?
This realization, along with all the walking she had, made her tired and hungry, and she dozed off. And now here she was, after a most curious dream, all alone. Even the butterfly was gone. Suddenly, a familiar and detested voice began speaking out in her head.
Maybe they tricked you. Maybe they didn't split up at all. Maybe it was just a ploy to get you out of their way, and you fell for it. You're probably all together right now, laughing. You shut up,
she said aloud. She thought about how Applejack left her, how she had asked her to remember Gummy's after-birthday party, how her friends would never abandon her. She grabbed the apple that Applejack had left and took a bite.
You shut up. You know well as I do why we all split up, and I've got enough problems without you bothering me, so go away.
Amazingly, the voice was silent. Encouraged, she got to her hooves.
Well, enough of sitting around. I've got to find a spring again, and some friends to meet up with. What did Applejack say again? The mouse will need you there. Or something like that. I guess I said, hey! Hold on a minute. Where the heck did that thing go anyway?
She glanced around desperately in the search of the rose fragment, growing frantic with every second. It was nowhere to be found.
Oh no, this is not good. This is the opposite of good. This is almost certainly the worst possible thing that could possibly happen. Oh, where did I leave it? Where did I develop? I dozed off. It was in my hooves when I dozed off. I'm sure it was.
Thoughts of her friends reuniting somewhere near the spring. Thoughts of them wondering what happened to her. And then forgetting about her. Thoughts of them saving the princess and fixing everything without her. Then laughing, hugging, and the princess would probably commemorate with them. The whole time Pinky would be lost forever in this forest. All because she was so stupid that she had to lose her rose piece. Maybe it was a good thing that her friends would never see her again, because it was not like they ever needed her to save the princess or...
No! I said shut up!
She rubbed her forehead with her front hooves, as if pushed the thoughts from her mind. In that moment of silence, she heard something. A rustling. She gasped. Then sent a hoof to her mouth, listening intently. Silence. And there it was again, almost directly in front of her. She led forward, looking around wildly. The rustling again, closer this time. She honed in on the noise, and snatched her green rose fragment from where it was. She let out a sneeze, right at the edge of the clearing.
There you are!
She shouted in triumph. Once it was in her hooves, it seemed to take on a new energy, glowing and shaking about even more. She began dragging her forward. She thought back to her dream and grinned. The gasped in surprise when it grew extraordinarily hot in her grasp. She dropped it, keeping an close eye on it so she wouldn't lose it again. It pulled itself along the ground, hopping occasionally to pass itself over a rock or fallen log. With a happy hum and a light bounce, she followed the shining fragment out of the clearing and into a forest, already thinking about how wonderful it would be to see her friends again. Applejack wasn't certain what to do. Hopefully Pinkie understood the message and realized that their separation was only temporary. But there was that other side to Pinkie, that unpredictable self-loathing. What if Applejack left her and that other side took over? She weighed her options. She doesn't go back and Pinkie Pie turns out fine. That's the best ending. But if she doesn't go back, and Pinkie doesn't turn out fine, then Pinkie's alone and depressed in the woods, and there was a chance she'd never motivate herself to find the spring. Which is why Applejack now sat on a log in the forest, biting her lip and torn between two very bad options. Going back would mean facing Pinkie again, and she knew that if she went back now, she'd never be able to leave her friend again. It was hard enough the first time. If she went back now, neither of them would be lost enough to find a spring. It would all be over, and the other four would meet up and wonder what would happen to him. I can't go back. I have to trust that she's okay. She can do it. She's stronger than she looks. If I go back now, I'll be doubting the strength of our friendship. I know she'll be fine. This thought didn't ease her mind as much as she hoped. Even so, she hopped off the log and headed off once more, walking several paces, then stopping suddenly. I can't! I have to at least peek in on her, just to make sure she's okay. I'll even let her know I'm there. She knew the way back. When she left Pinkie, she took care to remember how to return. She must have understood subconsciously that she decided to go back. After about 10 minutes of trotting past memorized landmarks, the edge of the clearing came into view. Well, she's not there. What if she left? I didn't even think about it. I suppose she'd be lost then. Hopefully her rose would be guiding her already. Her thoughts cut off when she heard a slight snoring coming from the clearing. I'll recognize that sound anywhere, Applejack thought with a smile. Suddenly, the snoring came a shout. Guys, help! Oh, now she's in trouble. Hold on, Pinkie, I'm coming! She charged for the wall of shrubs and branches that created a wall of the clearing. Guys! A surprising sounding Pinkie came from the other side. Applejack halted, stopping herself just before she broke through the edge of the clearing. Between two branches, she could make out the form of her friend staring glumly at the ground. Thank goodness. She was only dreaming. She continued observing Pinkie carefully and with concern. There were several minutes of silence as Pinkie sat alone. A variety of expressions swam across her face, from sadness to surprise to an anger that frightened Applejack. Then suddenly she spoke. Oh, you shut up! She took a bite of Applejack's apple. She must be talking to. You shut up! You know as well as I do why we all split up, and I've got enough problems without you bothering me, so go away. From her hiding spot beyond the clearing, Applejack threw in the hair triumphantly. You saw her, Pinkie! I know you could do it. Pinkie began talking to herself once more, but Applejack was distracted by a sound from the other side of the clearing. It was getting closer every second. Applejack glanced down from between the branches, trying to locate the source of the rustling. Whatever it was, in a few moments it would break through the shrubby wall of the clearing and bump right into her. Pinkie was searching about madly. Oh no, this is not good. This is the opposite of good. Applejack began to panic. I can't break my cover. If she sees me, she'll never let me go again, and I sure wouldn't be able to let her go either. But if she loses her rose, or worse, if she looks around for it, finds me. The rose fragment broke through the wall of the clearing, bumping right into Applejack's front left hoof. Without thinking, and acting upon pure intuition alone, she did the only thing that happened to come to her mind. She kicked it. With a thud, it landed nearly in the center of the clearing. Pinkie turned around surprised at the sound. Applejack bit her lip, nervously, as the rose fragment began sliding toward her again. That darn thing just don't give up, does it? She considered backing away from the clearing's edge, but realized that would make too much noise. With Pinkie listening intently for the sound of the rose, she would surely hear Applejack making a ruckus in the bushes. Instead, she stayed perfectly still. Pinkie began heading toward her, following the rustling sound of the rose. Closer, closer. She was a host of reach away now. The only thing between them was the thick branches and bushes of the clearing sedge. Applejack held her breath. Did she see me? I swear we just made eye contact. There you are! Applejack nearly gasped, certain she was caught. Pikey, we can't get back together. If we do, I know we'll never be strong enough to separate again. She was prepared to say. Luckily, she hesitated, long enough to realize Pinky was addressing the rose and not her. She began backing quietly away from the clearing's edge, while Pinky was preoccupied with the rose. She moved faster and faster as she got further away. Just as she managed to get behind a fallen log, the glowing rose fragment burst through the bushes where she had stood only a moment before. Pinky followed in its wake. Applejack watched her friend sink back into the woods, suddenly filled with the urge to call out to her, to call her back, and to apologize for ever leaving her. But she knew she had no choice but to watch her go. As her friend shrank into the distance, she suddenly felt incredibly alone. Just as alone as she felt in Manhattan. Just as alone she had felt when she got lost picking apples only a few days alone. It's true. Applejack was a pony who could normally appreciate solitude. Some days she enjoyed entirely alone, sitting against a familiar, rough, yet comfortable tree trunk, watching the sun glide across the sky. Then, as she drifted in and out of sleep, and gave thanks for such a beautiful world. Not to Celestia, but to the trees and apples and grass and blue sky and the clouds and everything beneath them. But this was different than that peaceful isolation. It's not even fair to call it that. Isolation, because her friends were always a holler away. This was more. This was alienation. Complete and utter separation. Nice alliteration. Almost as bad as my suspicion. I should stop with this mission. She thought of her friends, who were so far away from her, and who were all undoubtedly feeling the same way, and a teardrop fell to her below. Something twisted against her side. It was her pack. She had forgotten she was wearing it. It twisted again, but from experience she already knew what was happening, and with a smile she wiped her eyes and shrugged off her pack off her back and onto the ground. She followed it as it slid across the dirt of the forest, in the exact opposite direction that Pinky had traveled. For some inexplicable reason she began to chuckle. After a few seconds she was laughing, though she hardly knew why. But she was laughing just the same, and she saw no need to question it. So she kept laughing, while her pack, with the rose glowing faintly inside it, traced a path through the dirt into her friends. The last time Rarity was this muddy was either her last mud bath or the sisterhood social. This was much more unpleasant than either of those, however. She looked like she had been dipped in a vat of melted chocolate.
That actually sounds quite nice, her mother warned her. When this is all over with, perhaps I should create that. Chocolate baths. You could be the next big thing. All the benefits of a mud bath, plus the aroma and taste of the finest chocolate. That could be the next yellow. Or was yellow out this year? Maybe that was orange.
Her thoughts darted every which way. It was just so boring alone out here in the field, and she didn't keep thinking about every idea that flew into her head. She kept to thinking how dirty she was, and then she'd go crazy. Or even worse, she started to think about her friends. All of them alone. She adamantly detested the decision to break up. She knew it was unnecessary, but there must have been a better way, a way to stick together. If only they had thought about it more. It was too late now, of course. Now she was alone. And muddy. In reality, the mud had hardly bothered her. Yeah, she hated being filthy, but even she knew that there were times when one must simply get dirty, when a little grease or mud or dust is necessary for a pony to meet her goal. But preoccupying herself with her appearance, even if there was no pony around to see her, was comforting her somehow. It helped her pretend that nothing had changed, that everything was as it should be, that Princess Celestia was at home in Canterlot, and Twilight was in her library. Probably studying, that book club, Rarity thought. Fluttershy, Applejack, Rainbow, and Pinky were all at home and at peace. She trudged through the grassy field, unable to enjoy the magnificent view because she was alone. And what good is of a beautiful field if it can't be shared?
Goodness, I am muddy,
she quickly thought. For a moment there, Her mind had accidentally ventured dangerously close to the thought again. That thought of being separated with those lines of causality. Muddy, 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 muddy. Suddenly she stopped. She spotted something in the distance. Funny! She thought, and began trotting even faster towards her new destination. A distant pool of water. Minutes later, she was there. It was almost perfectly circular, and had the diameter of a wishing well. The water was a flawless blue, and though she couldn't determine the depth, it must have been up to her tail, or even deeper than the three of hers stacked on of each other. Either way, she was a confident swimmer. She loathed swimming, but her parents had forced her to take lessons when she was a filly, and the mud was beginning to dry and get crusty and itchy. With a splash, and not a second thought, she jumped in. The water went up only to her leg joints, but with majestic skill she did a swift roll, submerging herself for a moment, and scrubbing off the caked mud in the process. The water was cool and refreshing, sweet tasting. She finished and got back to her hooves. Good as new. She lifted a hoof to get out. Something was wrong, though. The hoof wouldn't lift. It was as if a powerful grip was holding her back. She grunted with effort, and tried to lift her other hoof. Stuck as well. In a flash, part of her realized. She was stuck. She was caught. She would be trapped for hours until some pony came along and helped her. No, no, let's not panic, she thought, panicking. I'm sure if I just relax and loosen up, I'll be out in no time. She became perfectly still, closed her eyes, and exhaled gently. Then she slowly and tentatively began raising a hoof to leave the shallow water. It lifted almost an inch, but then the downward pull overcame her efforts, and the hoof would budge no more. The sand beneath her water had sucked her down, and all four hooves were trapped, submerged about almost 4 inches. Rarity frantically searched the filing cabinets of her mind, scouring for advice, instruction, something, anything about her predicament. Surely Twilight must have said something about quicksand at one point, but she could not recall any such instance. Well, relax. I lifted this hoof a whole inch. If I could do the same thing again, I could free myself. You've been through it worse, Ratty. Remember those diamond dogs? Those ruffians were far worse than this, and you handled the situation all on your own. You could do this. Her confidence bolstered her self-conservation. She relaxed, loosened every muscle, and cleared her mind. It was easy. She was a regular at Ponyville Spa. She looked at the same hoof. Another inch. There! We're on our way out. Then she noticed something else. Something awful. She had just raised her hoof another inch, but it was trapped even farther in the quicksand than before. With gut-wrenching panic, she realized she wasn't just stuck. She was sinking. Her state of loose muscle calmness disintegrated as she panicked and began wildly thrashing around, pulling with her hooves, pulling to break free, because she was separated from her friends, and there was no pony for miles, and Ponyville was so very far away, and she knew her fate was not to get stuck and starve in some awful pit of sand. She pulled because her friends needed her, and she needed them, and it was getting dark, and what would happen when her friends reunited and she wasn't there? So she pulled, and sank further. She stopped, exhausted. The sand had now swallowed up to her leg joints, and the water was up to her belly. She closed her eyes for a moment. She was so tired. Am I really going to fall asleep here like this? Alone and stuck in some stupid sand? Maybe if I do, I'll wake up again, and this will have all been a dream. Not just this, but the rose, and the forest, and losing Applejack, and spilling up. She dreamed. Applejack. That's ridiculous. You can't cover apple seeds with toffee and expect to grow toffee-covered apple trees. She dreamed. Mother, I refuse to take these ridiculous swimming lessons. They are embarrassing and useless. What do you expect me to wake up in the middle of the ocean one day? And dreamed. If there's any problem at all, send up a flare and I'll do my best to find you. When she woke, the sun was already nearing high noon. For a moment she had no idea where she was. She brought a hoof to her eye to rub away the sleep, but the hoof would not budge. In fact, her whole leg wouldn't budge. Suddenly, she remembered, and the panic swept back in full force. To her horror, she realized she sunk even further in her sleep. The sand had absorbed each leg up to her body, and the water was halfway to her neck. Even her pack was submerged. Her pack contained food, and she was hungry. Her horn glowed. She lashed down at the sand with flashes of azure magic. For one exciting moment, she thought it was working. She pulled magically at the sand around her legs, digging down to free them. But every dig she made was intensely filled back in with the surrounding sand, and every time she began to dig in a new location, the last one disappeared. She remembered what she had told Twilight before they split up. How long ago was that? She had slept through the night. It must have been 12 hours ago.
Please don't wait. Be late. Is he too far away?
She mustered up her remaining strength and channeled it all into her horn. It was brimmed with a blue-white aurora that jumped and hopped like electric sparks.
Would this be visible in the daytime?
She let it loose, straight up in the air. Any doubts it would be visible were wiped away. The bolt shot from the ground to the sky like reverse lightning, and for an instant the world seemed to be masked by a blue filter. Then it was over. She could only sit and wait for help, if it ever came. Twilight wandered aimlessly through the field. It was noon, and she was scared.
Applejack was at the spring within 20 minutes of getting separated. Why is this taking so long? Did we do something wrong?
She was hungry, and her stomach let her know this as she passed a patch of delicious-looking flowers. But she didn't feel like eating. Her mind kept returning to the memories of her first day in Ponyville, when she met her friends for the first time. For some reason, an old saying of her mother's swam through her thoughts.
There's a first time for everything, but there's never a second first time.
This used to confuse her, but now she understood. Suddenly an idea occurred to her.
I'm not very good at getting lost in real life, but I'm getting particularly good at getting lost in books.
The pack in her side glowed purple as the flap unsealed and opened. She felt around for a book and grabbed one at random, bringing it down to hover before her eyes.
The Yellow Book of Riddles.
She had finished the blue and green editions with ease, and brought the yellow edition for the journey in hopes that it would provide a greater challenge. She surveyed the field before her, saw no obstacles in the direction of her travel, and began to read as she walked. The book bobbled up and down in the grip of her magic, but she had grown used to this. After years of experience, she could navigate all of Ponyville with a book in front of her face. I know the feeling. So with a field, she should have no trouble at all.
I'm as big as a dragon, though I soar without sound. On some quiet cold mornings I visit the ground. A farmer is glad to have me around, though too many of me in his plants I will drown. What am I?
Okay, I got this. Oh shit, no. Like. Okay, pass, Twilight! Twilight rolled her eyes.
A cloud.
That was so easy and almost embarrassing.
The answer to this question isn't everything except the opposite of what isn't yes.
Trickier, but the question was yes, though she thought this was a dumb question that left too much information to unaccount.
I have no mouth, but I never speak.
Not this riddle again. A river. Was there any riddle in this book that was worth her time? The more challenging questions were at the back. She flipped to the very last page.
You have made it this far. Congratulations to you. But have you really solved all, or is there more what you must do? One last question, I beg you, my dear reader. What fun is there really in being a cheater? Yes, I know what you've done. You skipped to the end, and in doing so missed the most fun part, my friend. Life is worth living, the entire way through, and by cheating the order, the real loser is you. So go back while you can. Let's try this once more. You flip to the beginning, and I'll open the door. Don't you hate those books that cheat like that? I mean, my gosh. It's like every time I play a game. I feel sorry for you, Twilight. I really do.
Twilight stopped walking. That was the last thing she expected to find. She read it once more, a thoughtful expression on her face. Then erupted into a grin.
What an interesting little book, she thought. I suppose it speaks the truth. I'll flip to the beginning. I'm sure I can make it to the end fair and square and... See, just then she felt a small tug on her side.
She dropped the book in surprise. It felt as if a small animal had crawled into her pack and was now thrashing about. She flung it off, then walked cautiously to where it hopped about crazy on the ground on the grassy field. Through the gap in the pack's covering flap, she could see a pulsating red light.
Of course! How could I have forgotten?
With an excited but nervous grin, she began walking after the pack, which was now sliding in the direction of the right where she had been heading. But first, she made sure to grab the yellow book of riddles off the ground. As she followed the sliding bag in amazement, a faint blue bolt flashed up in the clouds behind her. It was so distant, and her attention was so preoccupied with the rose, she never even noticed. Fluttershy diffidently pursued the rose as it slid across the sand. When her legs grew tired, she flew. When her legs grew tired, she walked. There was no time to think. Her entire consciousness was devoted to staying behind with the rose, to never letting it leave her sight, to following it through sand and dirt and more sand. Because of this dedication, she didn't notice that when the temperature dropped drastically, or when the sand began to slowly give way to rougher terrain, or when the rose was no longer melting sand but evaporating snow. If Twilight were there, of course, she would explain that the snow was actually sublimating. She kept on, drawing closer to Celestia, the cavern, that dark pony, and the one remaining pillar.
She's doing pretty well.
I know, I'm very proud.
Does she know?
Know what?
Of her friend, the trapped one.
No, I don't think so. What will happen? She has the rose piece, and she struck. The process cannot be complete. Not if a piece is missing, right? You are right. But our daughter, her friends have something. I'm not certain what it is, but it is strong. It'll be all right.
Are you sure?
Their friendship is.
Are you sure?
No, I'm not sure of anything, but I have faith in our daughter, in her friends, the ability of the universe to weed out the bad and nourish the good.
Do you remember the night you gave me the rose?
Of course.
Do you know what it was even then?
Yes.
Why give it to me? What could I have done with it?
My time with the rose was through. I never had to use it, thankfully. No one ever had to use it, and I knew that. If the time ever did come, the rose alone would not be enough. The one wielding it would need a certain quality, some unnameable form of love, an indescribable sympathy. For the rose must be used to defy the malicious intent of another. But the wielder of the rose must not hate or fear or despise that other. The wielder must love that other. That is what the rose needs, and that is what I saw in you, and that is what lives in our daughter.
Do you feel it? The instability, the quaking and the groaning?
Yes. The tethers are already snapping. Our world is drawing nearer to theirs. In their world, in the spring, the tethers are seen as pillars. Only one remains, and it grows weak.
But can they do it? Can they use the rose in time?
I do not know.
You said you knew.
I said I have faith.
I have faith too. Our little filly. I'm so proud.
I am too. She got it from you know.
Her strength? Don't be silly. That's from your side, not...
No, not her strength. Her spirit, sympathy, and love.
She is so brave.
She is.
And with that, another chapter grows to a close, and you know what I love most about this chapter? And I know I talked about separation last one. This one kind of basically just says, yeah, they can try and separate all they want. They can try and split up, but deep down inside, that nice little connection between them, that little friendship they bonded with each other, yeah, they're not split. Even when they try to split up, they can't really split up. And I kind of like that idea. It speaks to some of the main themes of the show, and there are times when I feel like this could pop up in the with the exception of losing Celestia's blood, this could probably pop up in the comics. I mean, we've seen death pop up in the official comics before, and we've seen other things like this happen. And the fact that each of the main six are getting their own little moments together is just so good and so well written. And I bet you folks are like me, you can't wait to finish the next chapter. Well, that'll be next week. As we all know, tomorrow's Fandom Fridays. And brother, do I have a treat for you. See you next time.